Welcome dear students. Today we are going to discuss South Asia and the changing world politics. In this lecture, I will focus on a number of objectives as defining the region of South Asia, why South Asian region matters in world politics, South Asia during Cold War bipolar politics, South Asia from end of bipolar world to present. Defining the region. The region of South Asia consisting of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka is most complex and unstable, hence most perplexing region in the world. It is important to point out that it is only in institutional terms of the regional organization of South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation that South Asia qualifies to be a region. It is demonstrated by the fact that till 2007, when Afghanistan was not in SOC, it was not considered South Asian. Logically, therefore, if a country quits the group, it ceases to be South Asian. Beyond the institutional parameters, when one invokes the major elements that foster regionalism like shared history and culture, political similitude, economic cooperation for mutual gain, power balance among member states and non-conflicting strategic postures. South Asia fails on all these counts. Its so-called one civilization or shared history is always contested. The partition of India in 1947 and Pakistan in 1971 were the results of that contestation. The common factor of democracy has barely reduced the danger of ethno-religious separatism. Intra-regional trade is not complementary and therefore very small, just 5% of the region's global trade. There is a gross mismatch between India and the rest, which also mars regional consciousness. The worst handicap for the region is the strategic divide between India and Pakistan, which is further complicated by the China factor. The weaker nations of the region utilize this triangular conflict to their advantage. Notwithstanding the failure of South Asia to qualify a region in terms of any standard definition of regionalism based on the above mentioned elements, it is important to have a brief overview of it. It is home of 1.6 billion people, around 27% of the world population. Thus, about 1/5 of humanity lives between the western reaches of Afghanistan and Pakistan on one side and the eastern reaches of Bangladesh and India on the other. It is a region that lies between the sea routes of the Indian Ocean in the Persian Gulf and the Asia Pacific and the land routes of Central Asia connecting Europe to the east. It is a large reservoir of natural and human resources, making it a prime destination for finance capital, a lucrative market for trade and a source of cheap raw materials. It also sits at the confluence of the richest source of oil, gas, rubber, manganese, copper, gold, tea, cotton, rice and jute, and is the transit point for most of the resources and manufacturers that crisscross the world. Moreover, it is the most heavily militarized and bureaucratized zone in the world, and it has a variety of complex and violent primordial ethnic groups. Historically, South Asia had been the finest passage of invaders from Central Asia, Persia, the Arab world and even Greece for thousands of years. Later, the region was colonized first by the Muslims and then by the European powers, and ultimately it comes under the suzerainty of the British Empire. Thus, British India was the base for which England projected its power towards China and Russia as part of the infamous Great Game in the 19th century. The region saw the rise of central state institutions more than 2000 years ago, and there is a continuous history of the rise and fall of civilizations and accompanying social political institutions and ideologies. In terms of geopolitics, the South Asian region has traditionally been looked at as a unified entity. The region is Indo-centric, and all other 7 countries of South Asia are located around India without any mutual geographic contiguity. The Indo-centricity of the region is substantiated by the fact that India comprises 73% of South Asia's land area, 77% of its population, and 77% of its gross national product. Apart from India, the other dominant state of the region is Pakistan, and these 2 dominant states of the region had gone to war 4 times since their inception in 1947. Thus, the difference between these 2 states are central to understanding the patterns of South Asia's security architecture. Why South Asia matters in world politics? Well, dear students, it's now turn to enlighten you about why the South Asia region is important and as such matters in world politics. There are number of reasons, both low politics and high politics, that explain the significance of South Asia. For your understanding, let me tell you, the low politics issues pertain to non-military and high politics issues pertain to strategic issues. Following points combining these 2 aspects are to be considered. South Asia is important by virtue of containing 1.6 billion people, or 27% of the global population. Such a concentration of people will always be important, whatever its circumstances. It contains more of the world's poor, about 500 million people, than any other region, even sub-Saharan Africa. The degree of poverty and instability in South Asia has multiple global effects. The issues of terrorism, ethnic conflicts, porous borders, democratic backsliding, and the enduring territorial disputes also make this region important. The nuclearization of the region, as India and Pakistan's going nuclear, has added another dimension to the regional security architecture. It has earned the region the title of nuclear flashpoint, or most dangerous place on the earth, further makes this region important for world politics. The major power interests in the region during and after Cold War have always added to the strategic salience of this region. This dynamics is only likely to intensify in the future. Significantly, the region is the primary site of one major power competition, that between China and India. Moreover, the crucial global competition expected to define the coming era US-China rivalry involves a country abetting South Asia, and Beijing has been increasing its presence and influence in almost every South Asian country and in the Indian Ocean region. These China-India and US-China rivalries are likely to have the biggest effect on the region, both in terms of risks and opportunities. Other major powers which have existing strategic or economic equities in the region, or in some cases their own concerns about China's rising influence and behavior, will also play a role. The larger powers will seek to protect their interests while managing their rivalries. Smaller states in the region will hope to exercise agency and take advantage of major power rivalries while insulating themselves from any fallout. Together, these dynamics will shape the geopolitical landscape of the region. What happens in the region in turn could have implications for how major power competition plays out globally, and thus for the international order. The fate of China-India rivalry will help determine the balance of power in the region. But it could also influence the extent to which those countries choose to cooperate or compete with each other, and whether they collaborate with other major powers regionally and globally, including in international institutions or interest-based coalitions. South Asia during the Cold War politics. During the Cold War, South Asia was largely considered a peripheral theater. US-Soviet competition affected the countries in the region and shaped their choices. But the subcontinent itself was not generally the primary or even secondary arena in the superpower rivalry. It was only with the 1979 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan that the region came into the Cold War spotlight for any length of time. However, it is important to note that South Asia does not remain insulate from the impact of Cold War bipolarity, as was the case with the rest of the world. However, the penetration of extra-regional players like US, Soviet Union and later China got entangled with the regional dynamics of Indo-Pak rivalry. India and Pakistan, in the form of military alliances, diplomatic partnerships, designed to safeguard their respective strategic objectives vis-à-vis each other. Pakistan's bilateral security agreements with the United States, signed in May 1954, in addition to its entry in the US-sponsored anti-communist alliance networks of SEATO September 1954 and CENTO 1955, paved the way for direct great power penetration in South Asian security complex. Pakistan utilized the military and strategic dynamics of America's containment policy that resulted in the infusion of extensive US military aid to Pakistan under the terms of bilateral security agreement and as part of the provisions of the two pacts to improve its relative power position vis-à-vis India. During the Cold War, South Asia witnessed shifting alignments, most notably of US sometimes tilting towards India. Nevertheless, it remained aligned with Pakistan for most of the time. However, Pakistan's alliance with China remained the most constant and enduring one, as both share the convergence of the Indian threat. China played a crucial role in the South Asian power balance under the Cold War structure. China's role was not so much to actively support Pakistan, although it certainly did that in some respects, as to separate Indian forces and thus weaken India. India was required to maintain 11 mountain divisions on the border with China, and each mountain division was 3 times more costly to support than an ordinary infantry division. At times, such as during the 1965 Indo-Pakistan War, China maneuvered on the border and issued ultimatums against India in order to pin Indian troops down and assist Pakistan. In the lead up to 1971 Indo-Pakistan War, India was forced into closer alliance with the Soviet Union in order to neutralize China. Thus, facing the Chinese threat and to counter the Pakistan's attempts to external balancing, India finally moved into the orbit of Soviet Union, which remained its principal partner during the Cold War. With the process of alliance building, the regional power structure also kept on transforming as it led to the changes in the capabilities of both India as well as Pakistan. As we saw in the beginning, India's overwhelming location, size, population, capabilities resulted in the imbalance of the South Asian regional power structure. However, with the subsequent external help, Pakistan, in order to balance the threat of preponderant India, virtually succeeded in turning the region into a bipolar power structure. With the birth of Bangladesh in 1971 and weakened position of Pakistan further accompanied by India's nuclear explosion in 1974, India was successful in once again shifting the balance of power to its favor. However, Pakistan's continued quest of parity with India and the subsequent developments in Afghanistan due to the Soviet invasion once again brought US back to the front and thereby joining the Pakistan-China alliance, helped Pakistan via huge amounts of aid to correct the imbalance. Thus, the South Asian regional power structure and alignment pattern during this period was largely shaped by the bipolar world order. The penetration of superpowers determined the nature of alignments. Pakistan joining the US-led coalition and India later on coming to Soviet orbit divided the region into two blocks and turned the regional power structure to a bipolar configuration. The other states of the region were not part of any balancing pattern. The smaller states also rejected Indian preponderance, but unlike Pakistan's hard balancing, they preferred to bandwagon. With it, and in particular, none of these states sought help from extra-regional alliances to resist India's hegemony. It was in this context the notion of regional organization to enmesh the so-called Big Brother came from these smaller states, especially Bangladesh and Nepal, and consequently SAARC was formed. It should be noted here that initially both India and Pakistan were hesitant to join the regional organization. South Asia from end of bipolar world to present. The transformation of global power structure from a bipolar to unipolar world has brought tremendous changes on the stage of international politics. US emerged as the sole superpower as the Soviet threat was no more now. The transformation of global power structure does not help to ease the tensions in South Asia. Rather, it has complicated the security architecture more. At the one side, Pakistan was successful to maintain the balance of power in the region. India, on the other hand, in order to mitigate the threat perception from China, conducted nuclear tests in 1998, which once again disturbed the regional power structure. However, not only was Pakistan quick to respond, but it also compels US and China to once again shift their focus to what was now called as the most moribund region. US was quick to condemn the nuclearization of South Asia and imposed sanctions on both India as well as Pakistan. During this time, the policy of US towards South Asia was largely shaped by its concerns of deadly nuclear weapons possessed by both states and prevention of any action that would undermine peace and stability of the region. China also, on the other hand, shifted its policy and adopted a more balanced approach towards both India and Pakistan. While acknowledging that the Indo-Pak rivalry is the root cause of South Asian insecurity, its management has been the key strategic calculus for Beijing's geostrategic analysts. Even though the Chinese perceived that New Delhi's dominance in South Asia will be substantiated further by the end of Cold War, they also considered that this transformation can create an opportunity for Sino-India rapprochement. In this backdrop, the then Chinese Foreign Minister Tang Jie-shan argued that the development of cooperative relations with India will in no way hamper the growth of friendly relations with Pakistan. In this line, he further argued China and India relations are China-India relations and China-Pak relations are China-Pak relations. Thus, making it clear Beijing wanted to engage both without disturbing ties with either. Despite the looming of non-proliferation issues regarding South Asia at this time, nevertheless, the United States was obliged by new global and regional economic and political scenarios at the dawn of the 21st century to reverse its traditional zero-sum policy of the Cold War era towards South Asia. With the emergence of Chinese and Russian influence in Central Asia and Southeast Asia, the United States seek a powerful ally in the region, and it chose India rather than Pakistan as a strategic ally due to the former's potential counterweight to China in the region, as well as its growing economy, which represented a new big market for the US business. The convergence of Indo-US interests and their growing alignment adversely affected US-Pak alignment and disturbed the regional balance of power. The subsequent Indo-US strategic cooperation and nuclear deal brought a major shift in Pakistan's foreign policy. Pakistan started a policy of diversification as Pakistan has tremendously strengthened its relations with China, pursuing to build close ties with Russia, Iran, Cuba, Uzbekistan and other countries. Pakistan changed its strategic thinking by re-evaluating its priorities in the region because of growing conventional imbalance between India and Pakistan. In reaction to the US-India strategic partnership, civil nuclear deal and the US support to India to emerge as regional power, Pakistan and China have strengthened their defense ties. China has agreed to provide F-22 frigates to Pakistan's Navy and signed an agreement with Pakistan for 2 nuclear reactors and justified its arms sale to Pakistan on the ground that the US is providing similar weapon systems to India, suggesting that such export is necessary for South Asian stability. Furthermore, the global competition between US and China is making its impact deep on South Asian region, accompanied with the subsequent race between India and China in the regional perspective. Additionally, the relations between India and Pakistan being at loggerheads has made the 2 power nuclear arch rivals, making the regional power structure more complex. The natural and obvious outcomes in such a conundrum are definitely alignments or alliance building or entente formation. This diplomatic riddle further leaves less choice for other smaller South Asian nations than to walk the tightrope while selecting their alignments, basically to survive. The phenomena of these new alignments or realignment in South Asia is also changing the perceptions of these smaller countries to rethink their hitherto strategy of bandwagoning with India and have started to move more closely towards the orbit of China. Unlike Cold War politics, China has become the most influential player in the contemporary dynamics of South Asia. By using its economic strength to expand its relations with India's neighbors such as Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal and Myanmar, it has attempted to control India's rise while simultaneously supporting Pakistan's development. A significant driver of change in South Asia's political geography has been the string of infrastructure projects in the subcontinent. The largest and most discussed has been China's Belt and Road Initiative, which envisages a large road and railway network. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or CPEC, a vital part of BRI, which connects the western part of China to the Gwadar port in Balochistan, gives China easy access to the Arabian Sea. In Sri Lanka, China's development aid has grown at a rapid pace, with Beijing acquiring the strategically located Hambantota port in the country. These projects in Pakistan and Sri Lanka have given China strategic access points in the ocean surrounding India, a key area of Indian influence. Beijing has realized that maritime strength in the Indo-Pacific will provide it the strategic leverage necessary to become a regional hegemon. Well, dear students, in this lecture I discussed with you South Asia as a region and problems of defining it as a such in terms of the indicators of regionalism. I also discussed with you why this region matters in world politics. This is a hugely consequential region for world affairs. I also discussed with you the regional security architecture of the region during the Cold War bipolarity, where the roles of extra-regional powers got entangled with the regional local Indo-Pak rivalries. I also discussed with you the position and thereby the contemporary regional dynamics of South Asia in the aftermath of end of Cold War to present. I hope you had enjoyed listening to me. Thank you.